Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. So something I've been becoming more and more aware of in my experience of life is the vibrational resonance associated with love. Ever since I first experienced it while deep in a plant medicine journey, life has made much more sense and been much easier. Now, by easier, what I mean is that I now know exactly how I wish to feel, and I can use discernment within my heart to guide me directly to the people, places, and things that resonate at that same frequency of love within me. Every once in a while, however, I come across a person, place, or thing that is resonating at such a high frequency of love that it allows me to recalibrate what I had believed up until that moment was possible within the realm of love that I can experience. Love, being the governing force of the universe, allows each of us the opportunity to charge one another's batteries and have our batteries recharged as a result. This is where the saying, as within, so without, stems from, as we can only put out into the world that which we own and believe within ourselves. These are the times and experiences that, for me, make life so special and worth being alive for. Today's guest fits that description to a T. The first time I heard him on Paul Chek's podcast, I was immediately intrigued to discover more about him and the incredible work he puts out into the world. Within that journey, I have been blessed with having the opportunity to experience the magic he creates out of the nature of the earth with his incredible essential oils and tinctures that make up his heart-centered business, Essential Oil Wizardry. Trust me when I say that anyone who purchases the ticket to take the ride into his world of elemental magic will be engulfed in the beauty of nature and the love he cultivates within that realm. If all of this wasn't enough, we will also in this episode be diving into his journeys within the realm of psychedelic medicines and how they have been able to shape his life from then on and allow him to tap deeper into himself, the nature he co-creates with, and the world at large. So please help me in welcoming the one, the only, Dr. Nick Berry to the show. Dr. Nick, man, good to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be a guest on this show.
Yes. And we were talking before we hit record that a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is the first time the world is going to hear any of your psychedelic experiences, right? And what an honor that you chose this podcast to broadcast that to the world. You know, I'm so excited to get into all of that and, you know, really like a place that I love starting, especially for someone like you, right? Who's from the, you know, typical medical world and has done, you know, a lot of different, you know, types of things in that world is how did you first become interested or, you know, aware of the world of psychedelic medicines, right? Was it something you were aware of when you were in medical school? Was it something you were always open to, but waiting for the right time for? Or was it something that, you know, over time you became more and more okay with and accepting of as time went on?
Yeah. So I got introduced to cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms when I was a teenager. And these plants came into my life at a time that was very difficult in my life, where my parents had a divorce that lasted about 10 years. They had a lot of anger towards each other, and I was gifted and or stuck in a group of friends that had started working with what I would call drugs at the time. And their invitation was to smoke cannabis and get exploratory with them and or get out of the group. And so with the pressures of being a teenager, having lost what I perceived as losing my family, I didn't have the strength to also lose my tribe. And so I started exploring cannabis, and I really didn't care for it initially. And eventually I opened up to the high and the euphoria. I would say that I really was touched with the gift of psilocybin mushrooms for my first time. I believe I was it was either 16 or 17. because of the challenges that I experienced as a teenager with my family's dissolution, I had turned to alcohol. I turned to alcohol after I got caught smoking cannabis by my mother, and she had a lot of concern for me. And because of that process, I started drinking rather than smoking because it didn't show up in drug tests in the same way. And that habit turned into an alcohol addiction when I was a teenager, where I was drinking about a fifth of vodka a day.
Wow.
And with that, about a year after I had started indulging in alcohol that deeply, I had the experience of exploring mushrooms for my first time. That journey was just such a powerful exploration of deep levels of senses and exploration, and was able to feel my physical body and the cosmos in such a unique way that I didn't have labels for or the words to describe at that period of time. I had explored mushrooms probably about 10 times within the period of a year. I guess what I want to highlight is around the 10th time, I had an ego death experience that was very challenging and difficult for me at the time, that reflected a lot of deep introspection. And what I had realized was that the alcohol that I was choosing to drink I was utilizing it in order to have control or sovereignty over myself and over my body and over my freedoms in conjunction with my relationship with my mother. And I realized that I wasn't hurting my mother, or I wasn't taking back my power by consuming alcohol regularly. What I realized was that I was just destroying myself. It was this powerful experience that really awoke in me and helped to repair my relationship with my mother at, it was either 16 or 17 at this time. I realized that alcohol wasn't serving me. And so I gave it up cold turkey. And so I realized at a very early age in my teenage years, about 20 years ago, the power of entheogenic medicines.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I wanted to stop by while I had your ear and share a very special announcement with you. You may have heard people say that we are facing an epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. We believe that this is only half of the story, and that the real epidemic and the root of feeling loneliness is a lack of connection. Do you want to connect to more purpose and passion with the important work you are doing? Do you wish you had closer friendships with people who understand you, listen to you, and are truly present with you? Are you wishing you and your partner could move deeper into love together? The connection in all of these areas comes down to the one most important element of connection, the ability to connect with yourself. If you are ready to see change in your life, if you are ready to feel differently when you wake up in the morning, if you are ready to step into the life you envision for yourself, the first and only route to making these changes is settling in, quieting down, and being able to connect to yourself. Now, this can be a major challenge in today's world with media, culture, and other energies that pull us out of our ability to connect. When you've tried fitness, meditation, and other self-development practices and still find yourself feeling alone and lacking connection, you may be feeling out of options and wondering if you'll ever be able to tap into your full potential that you know deep down is possible in your life. What we have found in working with our clients is that plant medicines, and cannabis in particular, can guide us in having the experience of what true connection looks and feels like. In this way, cannabis can act as a rite of passage for connection and a gateway toward the spouse, tribe, mission, and life you know you are ready for. Now, the pitfall here is that many people become codependent on the medicines, such as cannabis, and expect the medicine to do the work for them. If this continues, what will happen is the user will find themselves reaching for more and more cannabis to feel connection, without taking ownership of their role in the outcome of their experience, and thus they will fall into repeating the same painful patterns. As Zen Buddhism teaches, how you do anything is how you do everything. Therefore, if this painful pattern is showing up in your relationship with cannabis, it is likely a reflection of the same patterns you're experiencing in your friendships, romantic relationships, business, and your relationship with yourself. Learning to work with cannabis effectively will supercharge your experience and will help you get the result you are actually seeking, which is connection. We created a program to support seekers and high achievers like you in doing exactly this. To learn how to work with the healing power of cannabis to connect you back to yourself so you can unlock purpose, passion, and creativity in all areas of your life. What this program will give you is the long-lost user manual for cannabis. This user manual will teach you how to connect with cannabis correctly so that the plant can act as your spiritual aid and ally in life, just as our ancestors understood and practiced. If you're ready to unlock the full power of cannabis, meet like-minded people on the same path as you, build more purpose into your life, and have the most fun doing homework you've ever had, this message is for you. To learn more and qualify for your spot in the program, hop over to our Instagram profile at highly.optimized and book a discovery call. The conscious cannabis revolution is here. Will you be joining us? Sending all of you love. Enjoy the rest of the show. That's amazing, man. I mean, what a beautiful journey. And, I really feel like it highlights a lot of, really what is going on when people are searching, right? And they're seeking, especially around those ages, right? Like, I remember I tried cannabis for the first time when I was 14. And, the classic peer pressure type thing, like, was exactly what happened to me. And it sounds like it was pretty similar to what happened to you. I remember I was dating this girl. At this point, I mean, I had never done anything. I had never drank. I might have snuck a beer or two. And actually, there's a funny story with that too, where the first time I ever drank a beer, I remember my 3 friends and we snuck one from my mom and we ran over to the schoolyard, which is next door to my house. We were drinking it. And one of my friends knocked it out of my friend's hands and went, John can't hold his liquor. And he didn't know what that meant. So he was like, yeah, it's because TJ knocked it out of my hands, and it was just like, I think back to that moment. It's just so funny. But, I had really never experienced, an intoxicating effect of any sort. And, I went to this girl I was dating. She had like 8 of my friends, basically people that, some people that I had known deeply, some people that were kind of newer to, my life. And her dad was like a stock car racer. And so we went up to New Hampshire, and I remember they were rolling blunts in the back of there was like an SUV. And it was just like, those, like, I don't know if you ever had those like blunt wraps that were like totally artificial as hell. And they just smelled so much like artificial peach or grapes or whatever. And so like, it's so funny thinking back to it because they thought they were being sneaky and the whole car reeked of weed, right? So, I was super nervous. Eventually we went to the race. That was fine. We came back to our house, and that night we all piled into a room and snuck out onto the roof. And they were like, come on, you got to take a hit. You got to take a hit. And so I kind of like pretended like I took a hit. I didn't really take a hit. I was like, I didn't inhale, the famous Bill Clinton saying. And I got like a little bit of an effect, but I didn't really know what was an effect of it and what was just me convincing myself that I was feeling something. And then when I was around 16, that's when like I actually had my first experience, right? Where, very similar to you, I would actually almost call it like an ego death of sorts with cannabis, right? And at first I didn't like it at all. Just like you said, I see a lot of similarities within our stories. And it wasn't until because at that point, a lot of the way my friends were using it was they were already drinking and then they were smoking. And it was just like, that's like instant spins for me. Right. And so alcohol and I never really got along, which was a great gift that Spirit gifted me. I would get a couple of drinks in, get a headache. So I was kind of looking for my thing, right? Like, people are experimenting. What's my thing? And it wasn't until my senior year summer where I had a really old time friend who had moved to Maine come stay with me for the whole summer. At this point, I was interacting with cannabis maybe once a month, right? Like, and I would go watch Star Wars and just like trip out and just, have a good time as we do. He was like full blown addicted to weed, right? So every day he's like, what? We're not going to smoke weed? What do you mean? Like, so over that summer, I started really interacting with cannabis and became a daily user. The first time I tried a different plant medicine was MDMA when I was 23 at a music festival. By the time, and then like about a month after that, I was like, okay, yeah, like this was much different than I experienced or the thought I was going to experience. And so what's up with this psilocybin thing, right? I'm like, let's try that. And so I experimented with that and I did an extremely low dose and just had a really funny night, but a lot came aware to me. Like I remember I came out of it with a lot of tension all over my body. And at that point, I thought I just pulled a muscle or something, right? But there was so much in me that I was holding in, so much anxiety, right? So many signs that were there. And that was really what started my inner quest, and it seems like for you, like you were searching for something which we could call yourself, right? It's like that old 60s saying, I'm going to find myself, but it actually is pretty accurate when you think about it, right? It's like, who the hell am I? Why am I here? Where do I come from? Those, metaphysical questions. And, one of the things that always excites me is really getting into that, right? Like after those first couple times that you experienced psilocybin and you had your first ego death specifically, right? Because I remember my first one. I interacted with mushrooms probably 15 times. And at this point was like, I got this, I have control, like all these hilarious things that I was really setting myself up for the perfect scenario where my ego just split into a million pieces. I remember it was like we were watching a show. At this point, when I did mushrooms, it was like watch funny stuff, laugh, things like that. And so we were watching something like it was like Tim and Eric or something ridiculous that like there are like traps when you interact with psychedelics in terms of like shows that like are just no-nos. Like it's too much laughter. It's too much to even get out. And so like I couldn't even laugh. I was just like, like I couldn't even laugh. Like there was too much coming out of me and it triggered something in me that I thought I was choking. Right? Like something like visceral just went over me. And it was like within a nanosecond, it was like, you're choking, you're dying, you're going to die. Like, and it wasn't even like I had time to process it. It was like, that was a belief that I knew. Right. And so that led me on a very interesting experience where I had to surrender and like pray, like straight up pray. And then at a certain point, I felt the entity of mushrooms just laughing at me and being like, well, now you know what we really are. Now you can go lay down and interact with these in a way that's going to serve you a lot better than the way you've been doing up until now. And after that, everything changed for me. And, my question for you is after that ego death, from then on out, how did you look at psychedelics? Because I imagine before that, it was kind of like, what are these? Or what are these doing? And then I imagine that experience shifted things. Is that accurate? And if so, like, what did that shift from there on out when you decided to engage in psychedelic medicines? Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah, great question, Ryan. So that experience for me did shift things, and maybe not in a way that one would expect. And so after that experience, I had a lot of insight on how to enhance the quality of my life. And so I went cold turkey with alcohol, and I imbibed on sobriety, and I focused on school and got clear with my goals and aspirations to become a pharmacist. And I shifted my negative thought patterns, my disagreement with life. I started really applying my intelligence to school, and I started getting really high grades, and I focused on the goal of going to pharmacy school. And so I actually stepped away from cannabis and psychedelics probably for about 8 years at that point. And I immersed myself deeply and completely into the study of serving the public through my passion of pharmacy.
That's amazing, man. A couple of notes I wrote there was there really is something to being high on life, right? Like there really is something to sobriety, right? And, this is something that I came to a couple of years ago, right around the same time I started Highly Optimized. Weird correlation. I realized a lot, right? I realized that even though I had made quote unquote sense and logic around how I was interacting with cannabis and these medicines, really cannabis has always been my biggest one that was like a daily habit. And, it really became just that. It was a habit, right? I wasn't really seeking anything from it. It just became like part of my nightly routine. And, I thought I was respecting it, right? I thought I was respecting myself because, hey, it's at the end of the day, my full day is like sober. And at this point, I was very rigid in my life. Like, I mean, I had quit coffee. I had quit literally everything. I mean, I was intermittent fasting to a fault. And actually, Angie Chek was the first one when I went to HLC1 to be like, you sure you're not in the first stage of adrenal exhaustion? And, like maybe that's why you're getting so energized from fasting, right? And I know you get energized, but I was getting like shaky energized. And, it wasn't until I had another plant medicine experience in Las Vegas, the weirdest of all places to have an epiphany, where I realized like, oh, I think that I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I quote unquote know what I didn't know, which was, hey, there's much more to this plant. And this plant is not upset with me. It's just saying like, hey, what are you interacting with me for? Right. Like, it doesn't seem like you have any questions. Are you numbing yourself out with me? Right. And about 5 years before that, I had lost my father and hadn't really gone into that at all, hadn't really done any work, and noticed after that time that my busyness went on like high alert. I mean, it was like constant. I mean, I'd be working 10 to 12 hour days, coming home, cleaning until the second I went to bed, always filling my schedule up. Weekends were just like, I mean, I was constantly stressed. And so, that's why I was interacting with cannabis, right? Was to finally be able to remember how to relax. Once I actually got clean for a couple months, right, off cannabis, I mean, within the first week, it was just like unbelievable euphoria. And ever since then, I've had a very different relationship with cannabis, which is now what I teach in Connect with Cannabis, right? How I've been able to evolve my relationship and helping other people do the same thing. Because one thing I find with cannabis specifically is that it's kind of, no one really talks about the fact that most people are addicted to it. I can already hear people be like, what? It's not addictive. And it's like, listen, guys, I get what you think, but I really want to ask yourself, like, when was the last time you took 2 weeks off, right? And didn't have a challenge doing that, right? Like, these things are things people don't really talk about. And when you get onto a spiritual journey or whatever you want to call it, you really start evaluating everything, right? And this is what stillness does with meditation and whatnot. It really allowed me to get clear with myself and realize like, I am not honoring this medicine, and therefore I'm not honoring myself, right? Because as within, so without. And so through that journey, it really made a lot apparent to me. So you're 100% on the money. Like, there really is something to being sober. And I spend most of my time now sober, minus cacao. I love my daily cacao. That is awesome. But other than that, I haven't had a drip of alcohol in so long, just because I never liked it. It was the easiest thing for me to put down. Cannabis was much more challenging because it made me face my darkness, right? My shadow. But the great thing about the shadow, right? And this is something people don't really talk about, that I had never heard before I learned it, was that the shadow is, at least for me, maybe this is my projection, but the shadow was always something that was like, ooh, like the things that you don't like about yourself. But the shadow also holds the things that are your power zones, the things that you don't realize are your strengths, right? Like, and that's where, like Paul Chek saying, if you spot it, you got it, comes from, right? It's like, it's not just with the challenging things, right? That's where the negative ego brings us to, or the lower ego rather. But it's also the things like, hey, if you see someone who's beaming love out into the world and you're kind of feeling reclused, and you see that in them, that is lurking within you and can be brought out. And a lot of times when we're interacting with medicines in a way that's really an escape mechanism, right? Like the way that we've both been talking about interacting with cannabis for a while, and, other medicines too, we don't have those things come out either, And so really at the end of the day, what changed for me was realizing that I am infinite, right? And so I wasn't so afraid of what was lurking inside of me, because I realized, hey, even the challenging things, I believe anyway that I signed up for all of this. So I'm meant to discover those things. And, honestly, the challenging aspects of myself and the challenging aspects of everyone, right, are a lot of times the exact things that you're going to be able to help other people through, right? So like the challenges you went through with, repairing your relationship to your mother. If one of your friends or colleagues or anyone, now comes to you with a challenge with their mother, you're going to be relatable to them. You're going to be the one that's able to hold that key that unlocks the lock within them that allows them to repair that relationship, or at least use discernment on whether or not they're ready to repair that relationship. And so I think that's one of the coolest gifts that these medicines can give us, is the ability to, and also the medicine of being sober too, like being able to, really evaluate ourselves and take inventory and see, what things are lurking within that we can bring out,
Yeah, those are all beautiful insights, Ryan. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, I think one of my deepest questions for you at this point is, when you got sober, right, and you went into medical school and you started your profession, in medicine, right, what became apparent to you that was now possible, right? Obviously you were in school, you were doing these things, but if we jump a little bit ahead, right? And like, say you're in, second, third year school, right? I know that we talked about in Highly Optimized, that, there was a certain point where you realized like, maybe this isn't the paradigm I want to be in, right? So, I'm curious what happened around then and whether or not psychedelics were a part of that, like awareness, or whether or not that came to you from the medicine of life.
So there was both a natural progression and evolution within me that led me on my life path to work with plants and medicine. And there was also a powerful event that empowered a transformation and a switch in my life path. So the synchronicities of life empowered me with working at an Eastern Western pharmacy out of school. And I had worked within my own body. I had been working with Chinese medicine and homeopathic medicine for mononucleosis and chronic fatigue, which I had suffered from concurrently throughout high school up until I finished pharmacy school, and probably about for another year beyond that. And so I always personally benefited from these alternative types of medicines, right? And I was under the belief that pharmaceuticals were the way to optimal health, because this is what I had been schooled and educated about. Probably within the year or two after I graduated pharmacy school, I asked the question to myself, and I perceived that lots of the pharmaceutical medicines, they work on masking or treating symptoms without addressing the root of the problem. And so while this can be an application for use and for health, I perceived that they weren't getting at the root. And I felt that my goal in my journey is to empower people to get at the roots of their issues and to have autonomy and freedom. And so, these are some natural mind evolutions within myself of my journey. I mentioned that I did have a powerful event which really redirected my life's flow. And so around the same time that the pharmacist who owned the pharmacy was coming back from Europe and needed less support at her pharmacy, was around the same time that Burning Man was occurring that year. And so life's synchronicities empowered me to travel with a friend who was living in Miami at the time, where we both attended my first burn. What Burning Man taught me was to live life in the flow and to trust being in that excited state, and to trust the universe and the alignments that occur. I do recall going to my first burn and having some ego within myself that was very present within me, feeling that I was an empowered doctor and I was young and I had just graduated pharmacy school and that I was really special. And when I introduced myself to other people, people said, "Oh, cool. Yeah." And, artists of all types and geniuses, wild geniuses of all types of accords without the necessary doctorates behind their name were just so intriguing and had so much to offer the community. And so it really was a great reflection that certifications are an aspect of life, and that everyone has their own skills and radiant beauty that are so profound. And so this experience at Burning Man, I felt as though as I was acting from a state of joy, wonder, and curiosity, that I would notice just these perfect alignments. I would be thinking something and something would happen, or I would be seeking something and I would receive something. And so that from the energy of Burning Man, I had really connected with a I believe this was the same year that I had really connected with an EFT practice, emotional freedom techniques. And I found that it was a very powerful tool for reprogramming and dissolving some pain and sadness that I had been experiencing. The synchronicities led me to San Francisco, where I continued with a course in emotional freedom techniques. It was a deep dive. I believe it was for 6 weeks. And I had a bunch of money saved up from working in pharmacy, and I lived out of my vehicle, and I attended this 6-week event, and I was just doing massive work on my constructs, because I was either 24 or 25 year young doctor, and I hadn't lived a life because I had always been in this school mentality and working towards the future. And so I had a lot of pain and emotional trauma, and I was empowering myself to learn who I was. And so this experience at Burning Man and living life in the flow brought me to the Bay Area, where I had some friends who were starting a cannabis testing facility. And so the synchronicities were, I believe in cannabis as a medicine. I don't recall I was using it at this time. I think I used it for about a year after pharmacy school again, and kind of fell out of my favor and preference. But I believed in its applications with its cannabinoids and terpenes to really help empower or minimize other types of side effect profiles from different drugs that people were using. And so Burning Man brought me to reconnect with my friend Ray and ask myself the question, how does a pharmacist fit into this picture? How can I help to bring more legitimacy to this non-patentable plant medicine that I believe and I believed was overly used and abused, and that there were many people that had some sort of addictive patterning with it? And also, I believed with appropriate conscientious use, it could be a powerful tool in medicine for people. And so the synchronicities of life and exploration with different entheogenic medicines, the entheogenic medicines for me, they brought a level of fun. And if I were to relate to my younger self when I had a more active entheogenic exploration, this was after pharmacy school and about a decade ago, where I had a few years where I went really deep with my experimentation of different psychedelics. And for me, what had started off as fun and exploration and taking a little break from the world of pharmacy to go explore and find myself, what I had learned, kind of the fun, novel experiences and being in the flow and the experience of a novel type of lifestyle. What really started to happen was my mind and my body began to purify, and I got to know myself, and I got to trust my intuition on a deeper level. I learned how supported I was with as little or as much as I had at any given moment. So I learned to trust life more. I learned to trust myself more. I learned to trust others more. And I would be able to go into a complete new city, just having my vehicle, and I would make friends and connections and be able to be very adaptable. And so this type of lifestyle empowered me with a lot of levels of trust and to continue doing my own processing work. And so what started off as a fun exploration really began to heighten my spiritual connection with myself and with the universe around me. And I'm very grateful for the path and the wisdom through my experiences, which totally ranged and varied. And I feel very fortunate and grateful that I'm alive and I'm in excellent health. And I'm grateful that I made some mistakes when I was younger. And I'm grateful for where I am today because of all my experiences.
Wow. That's like the perfect tale of what is possible, right? Within psychedelics when using them with intention, having a certain air of responsibility. Of course, like, when you go to Burning Man, when you go to these music festivals, right? Like you are going to be more spontaneous about it, right? And so like you'll hear a lot of people talk about like, kind of like how I look at psychedelics most of the time, right? Which is like, hey, I'm going to feel the call, I'm going to do it, yada, yada. But also in realizing that a lot of that is still the mental game. It's the left brain game of like, okay, when is the right time? And so it's like finding that pendulum, right? Where, you tune into the moment, right? Because all it really exists is the present moment, right? And so there's been times where I've been to music festivals and, otherwise might not have interacted with this medicine, but I'm with the right people. It's the right moment. And I'm like, yeah, there's something in me that says, hey, this is going to be enjoyable, right? And by enjoyable, I don't necessarily mean easy. I don't necessarily mean only fun, right? And this is something you talked about, right? Like psychedelics can be fun, and I see this happening within the realm where people are taking them way too seriously. They are a serious thing, right? Like definitely like have awareness on the full range of what can happen, but by no means think that if you're having fun on them, you're automatically using them the wrong way. How I look at them is like they have a broad range of colors. And one of those colors is the potential of fun. But also you might have sadness, you might have anger, you might have a lot of different things. And so it's about going into it with that. But if you're, someone like me who like, I, really like love cracking jokes as I'm coming up on combo, right? Which is not exactly an easy medicine, right? It's like a very it's just, for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically frog venom that they burn you, they put it into your arm, and then you swell up like a grapefruit and you puke, right? And it's like cleansing the emotional body. And, it's doing a lot of great stuff. But I noticed that in certain ceremonies I was in, it was like a very somber type thing. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm not walking to the gallows here. Yes, dude. Yes. And Nick just showed me his combo dots, those who know. It's like, I'm not walking to the gallows, guys. Like I chose to do this. I'm going to enjoy it. Right. It's, I'm excited to meet whatever darkness is in me. Right. Because that darkness, however I choose to perceive it, has gotten me to the point that I was at that point, right? So I have a lot of grateful, moments for it. I have a lot of gratitude for it. I have a lot of thanks for it. And at the same time, it's the moment to let it go, right? So I'm going to enjoy the process of letting it go, right? It's funny because some people don't know how to react. Like when I'm like swelling up like a grapefruit, my throat's closing and I'm still like able to like laugh and whatever. And, that's like, what I tell people is like, listen, like you're on your own ride. It gets to be whatever you want. Like if you're feeling like heavy and stuff, like, yeah, you don't have to laugh, right? But if you're feeling light and you're going into a combo ceremony, like laugh all you want, right? Like there's no rules within the realm of psychedelics other than really becoming aware of yourself so that you can make the right choices and discern on whether or not these medicines are right for you, period. And then if you discern and decide, yes, they are, then at what point, what are you dealing with? What could potentially happen? Where are you? Who are you with? Right? Like all of these things that, I make a point to talk about in every episode, right? Because, why I started this podcast is to allow people the gift of really, being able to understand when these things and if and when these things are right for them. You talked about like breaking out of the box, right? Like breaking out of the box of, the typical paradigm of, pharmaceutical medicines and, pharmacy. And, what an amazing gift, right? Like I remember the first time I went to a music festival and I was like, wow, you can have this in life, right? And it was so freeing, right? Because I believe that somewhere in all of us is the adventurer, right? Like, I mean, let's think about what humans were up until like really like the 1920s, right? I mean, the cowboys, all these people, like, yeah, like you might look at that in one way, or, someone might look at that as like, well, yeah, but their lifespan was so much shorter and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but those guys and girls lived. Like they had some real challenges. They had some real wins. They had some, really amazing moments staring up at the stars when alone with a fire burning, right? And just connecting with nature and being present with no phones near them or anything. And, I love technology. Technology is awesome, but it's just about understanding, like, have the full range of experiences, right? Because, for me, I know I'm a wanderer of the wide, wide world. At least that's the phase I'm in right now. I'm enjoying travel, adventure, and exploration, right? As you put it. What I heard in your story was the ability for these medicines to make you present, right? You were always living for the future. And this is something that I know I've fallen into, and I imagine many people listening can empathize with, right? Is like we're taught from an early age, like, hey, make sure you know what you want to do when you're 18, which is the most insane thing in the world. Like thinking back to when I'm 18, I was like, I was a child, right? Like, how was I supposed to know what I was going to do for the rest of my life? That's a weird indoctrination that we do anyway, but really like allowing us to be present, right? Like, yes, it's great to like be able to look ahead and know where you want to go, right? Like, okay, in 10 years, I believe this is what I want, right? Like this is what's, possible for me, but also being able to tune into the present moment because, a problem or a challenge, rather, I like to switch that word, a challenge that I ran into in my life was being way too rigid and structured. And so, I would make a plan, let's say to, go to a certain school or this or that. And then the flow of life would take me elsewhere, right? And I would fight it and be like, no, I need to go to this place. I need to do this, this is the type of person I want to date. Why is this person coming in, right? Instead of just going, oh, this is what I need. Okay, cool. Or this is what I get. Cool, right? And, now that I go through life in that way, it's been such a monumental shift and it's been so freeing, right? Like we hear this idea of surrender, right? But, I think one of the main challenges in our world is due to our left brain dominant society, we hear words like surrender or love, right? And we read them as just a word, right? And these are things that until you experience, like I remember one of my first heroic doses on mushrooms, just literally being weightless, like I felt like I couldn't control any of my body and I was just sobbing and heaving and it was just like ultimate surrender. And that's when I knew I'm like, oh, that is the direct experience of what the word surrender entails, but it's just a word, right? Like, it's kind of like you're reading the label, right? But you got to eat the food to actually know what it is, right? If you want to understand what meat is or what, a vegetable is, you can't just read about it. At a certain point, you just got to go try it. And that will actually entail and integrate into like, oh, now I know what a Brussels sprout is because I've experienced it, right? And this is the challenge within talking about psychedelics, which is why I had to make a psychedelic podcast because I imagined that the only people listening to this are going to be people that have either experimented or are curious, right? Not that they actually might, but they're just at least curious about it. And, you were talking about, like addiction, right? And this got downloaded to me, right? Where, especially with cannabis addiction, but also I would really like go to really think any type of addiction, right? Is that substance really addicting or is avoiding trauma addictive? What is the pattern that's underneath it, right? Because I like to translate things like that. Like, we keep saying, or society keeps saying we have a loneliness epidemic, right? And it's like, loneliness isn't the problem. That's the result, right? The problem is a lack of connection and not understanding how to connect, right? So it's like, are these things really addictive or are we just putting the blame on this thing? Like, oh, I was addicted to cannabis, right? And it's like, well, cannabis is simply a plant. It's much more than a plant, but it's also a plant, right? Like it's not telling you to interact with it, right? Like there's something that you're going to, and it could be out of genuine curiosity in the way that I imagine we're both engaging with medicines these days, where we've continued to deal with that trauma and, like really check in and have our sober, periods where we're like, okay, is there something I'm avoiding, right? And so, I really love that whole philosophy of like, let's get down to the root cause of these things. And my question for you is, I know you've had a couple, bigger experiences in your life, right? Like ones that, could be described as monolithic, right? And I know we've both worked with, 5-MeO and, for anyone listening, once again, it's something that is really challenging to explain, but I know you have a tale of it, right? And I'd love to give you an opportunity to dive into that, right? And, talk about it and really, try the best you can to put it into words, because I know it's like a hilarious thing to even say, try to put into words, because it is everything and nothing at the same time. And so I would love for you to be able to get into that. And, really, if you want to talk about the whole experience and then read your tale or whatever way you'd like to get into it.
Yeah. So, I recognize psychedelics and entheogens as they can be a path, and they're not everyone's path. I by no means believe that psychedelics are right for everyone. And I'm grateful that, Creator brought them into my life at an earlier age, and I've been able to adapt with them in and out of my life, both with extended periods of abstinence and integration, and also reintegration with a deep level of depth and explorations with microdose and patterns of abstaining as well. 5-MeO was so specifically 5-MeO DMT, because there's many 5-methoxy different compounds. And so what I'm going to share is an experience that I had.
Mm.
And I had worked with 5-MeO-DMT about a decade ago. And at that time in my life, I felt like I had already cracked the code in which it had gifted me. For me to break through, I had someone who was offering it to me, and my body needed a very high dose of it. People say that the breakthrough dosing is about 2 milligrams. And about a decade ago, I had worked with something like 6 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 12 milligrams, and I believe it was either 16 or 20 milligrams, which really broke me through. Yeah. And what I had experienced in that episode and in that time in my life, I had already received that gift. And my experience led me into a void of nothingness. And so this was shortly after I had graduated pharmacy school. And, maybe people that I idolized were successful in pharmacy business. And I had different thoughts and different feelings and emotions, and was very much more in the matrix. And so in this black void, I was able to witness so much of my thoughts and my patterning. And I realized that all of it was worth nothing. And in that nothingness void, all I could feel was love. And it was a disconnection of everything that I thought had value. I was able to perceive everything was meaningless. There was nothingness. And my heart really blew open. And about a decade later, I had a lot of evolution and growth on such a deep level through life experience and the potency of the times. And I had almost a 180 experience with my most recent 5-MeO-DMT experience. And so what I'll do is I'm happy to share some of my journaling of my experience with my most recent experience. And I hope that I've done a good job of inscribing these codes in words for people to feel. And so this is just my raw writing, and so I'm going to share it. And so it says Day 3, Ascension Meditation Portal. 5-MeO Jaguar, the pure molecule of 17 milligrams with one fluff dose. I was the first to sit and receive this medicine on our integration day after Sananga and Bobansana Hape. I was the only one scheduled to receive, which opens the door to unlimited possibility. After a few hours of preparation, the lamp of light is served to me. I intuited 16 milligrams. My facilitator felt 17 to 18 milligrams. I requested 17 milligrams. When I received the medicine, I inhaled too quickly and breathed out some of the medicine early, holding the rest deep in my lungs with deep reverence. My experience was a profound deepening inside from yesterday's work. Feeling my body contorting and opening in spirals, I rotated around the mat. The expansion of my breath with intention merged all concepts of things, symbols, and benevolence into a moment beyond time for all expression to feel. This medicine is one of embodiment through experience and must be felt. As the experience progressed, I felt the collapsing expression of joy, love, and bliss expand into all that is. With focused breath, these attributes can be delivered into the body, bringing more healing and inner ascension codes. Perhaps the most profound experience during my journey was embodying the space within myself and witnessing the universe's brilliance shining upon itself with the feeling of nameless, all that isness, creating names, colors, concepts, and ideas of duality, experiencing the grand illusion of all. In this experience, I am master architect, declaring resolve, freedom for all, healing to all sentient beings for all time and space immediately. Collapsing into the moments, I recognize the more I surrender into pleasure, the more my body dissolves into the eternal cosmic giggle. The undulations of my supreme creation awakens into crystal clarity, inviting me into my most center core. I am participating and declaring the grand celebration of the eternal now. Collapsing and bending timelines, I meld fully into my body, spiraling into more joy, bliss, spilling these vibrations, creating a wave of purity eternally. Relaxing fully into complete sovereign love, I embody my full truth of God presence in this now always. There is a feeling of perpetual waves that ripple out into infinity, spilling out more love with all considerations for more, as much as all can witness and receive. Deeming this medicine, ascension meditation training, my experiences with deeper dives of 5-MeO embody pure potential, energy of love, infinite allowance, divine surrender, and a remembrance of our Creator. Drum roll, the Creator is us. Still, I feel the grand opening of relaxing into more bliss, peace, and joy, and that feeling of waveform collapsing into itself, auto-generating all of creation. So thrilled am I to witness this eternal remembrance for all to see, remembering where I will be returning to at the apex of this body's journey. May we all burst into more ecstasy forevermore. My friend shared with me that at the beginning of my journey, I danced around my pad in bold geometric shapes, with very specific organization and patterns. My lower extremities shook and moved around at the 3-minute mark. It's amazing to a witness. I have no conscious recollection of these moments, and confirms, especially at higher doses, there's a risk, and to enjoy this medicine in sitting with a sitter. I perceive I can safely go much deeper into Foreverland with this molecule. 20 milligrams may be the dosage I choose to explore for my next deeper dive. Feeling so grateful for my personal journey of grand awakening. So those are my rough writings of what was one of my most powerful experiences with 5-MeO DMT.
Wow, man, that was so poetic and beautiful. You know, a lot of that reminded me of my experience as well, where I was everything. I was also nothing. I was black. I was white. I was literally everything that ever was. And at the same time, nothing, right? Because where nothing ends, everything begins. And where everything ends, nothing begins, right? We get into like the first time I interacted with that medicine, I just came back going, well, this changes everything, right? And by changing everything, it was really understanding that, similar to you, like I had a lot of my hypotheses come what I would consider my truth, right? I won't say objective truth, but for me, they definitely came true, right? Where I had already had some suspicions on, of course, like things people had talked about. I mean, this information is out there. I've heard Chek talk about it before and everything, but again, having the direct experience of it, for me, that medicine specifically did more to restore my faith in ultimately myself, because I could say the universe, but what is the universe? It's us, right? And that's what you were saying, like, paradox, actually the creator is us, right? And this is something that I've gotten into really deeply with the mystery schools too, of like, what they call Elohim, right? Or the creator of this universe, right? That lives in the 8th dimension. Really, like when we travel, we get to essentially do like a, how would I call it? Like a forward projection, if you will, of like what's to come. And you want to call that death. You want to call it whatever you want to call it, right? I think death is a charged word, right? It kind of invokes that the ending of something, right? And really, like what I perceive, quote unquote, death is another chapter in a series of infinite possibilities, right? Because, depending on what tradition you follow, we have a physical body now with a soul that's bridging our physical body to the infinite spirit that we are. And then our ultimate mission here is to evolve our soul, to allow us to allow the universe, aka Elohim, aka everything that ever has been and will be, the creator, whatever you want to call it, source, universe. Our mission is to allow that to become aware of itself and the infinite possibilities that could potentially happen within the scope of everything. And so, that's why there's quote unquote evil in the world. So why there's all these things, because at the end of the day, the way I like to relate it is we're essentially playing a video game, and we're all so focused on the screen that we forget that we have a controller in our hands and it's simply a video game, right? So, for anyone who has challenges with like, nihilism or any of these things of like, nothing means anything. Why, if there's a God, why is there evil happening? It's like, all I can tell you, right? And I imagine you agree, is that there is something bigger happening here, right? Do I objectively know? Absolutely not. I don't want to, right? Like, I don't want to open my Christmas presents before Christmas morning. Like, I know I've experienced what's to come, and there's a certain amount of it that I'm not going to remember on purpose, right? Because what you experience in that type of realm is so expansive that it really can't fit in a human vessel, right? Like, it can be attained. It can be a feeling that you tap back into when you're in a sober state of mind or when you're interacting with other medicines, but it's really not something that we're meant to fully comprehend, right? Like, it's something that has to be experienced to really comprehend. And, you were talking about the void, right? And I love this conversation because, one of the things that I've realized is that the scariest part for me in a 5-MeO DMT experience, or even like we were talking before, I'm with meditation, because I've been going very far out with the help of your third eye oil. For anyone listening, get Nick's third eye oil. It is amazing. It will up level your meditation game to a almost scary level. And so, when I enter the void, right, it's the nothing. And that's where I think a lot of people have the quote unquote ego death and all these challenges of fear and all this stuff, because it's like, oh my God, there's nothing, right? But that is the ultimate test of faith, right? If you can get there and embody faith, then you move on to everything. And right after everything comes oneness. And that is like the ultimate bliss that it seems like you were able to reach in that experience, right? Where your heart gets blown open. You realize like, oh my God, it's all love. It's all good. That is such a beautiful, beautiful experience, man. And, one of the things that I'm curious for you is like, in your own personal life, how do you integrate something like that? Like, what are your specific methodologies or modalities that you use to be able to comprehend and make sense of an experience that huge and expansive?
I'll speak a little bit more about the experience that I had, and then I'll wrap it with that question.
Please.
So when I had that expansive journey, and I shared with you about a decade, I experienced a void, and it was this nothingness, and this nothingness was everything. And there was a feeling of aloneness, just myself, and myself being the all that is, and connecting with a feeling of love. Now, a decade later, this previous experience that I had, through closed eyes, as I was stretching and opening up my physical vessel, which continued to dissolve and just almost squirm on the ground, I would imagine, where I was just relaxing into the moment deeper. And I witnessed almost a Mandelbrot pattern, a fractal pattern, where everything would just open up and get deeper and more light. Every moment I would open up my legs and my arms, and I would stretch them open. They would surrender and they would relax a little bit more tension, and just energy and light would just shoot up and radiate through my whole vessel. I just got to experience the pleasure of all that isness. And 5-MeO DMT is not typically a very visual activating molecule. It's oftentimes one of deep remembrance, and it's felt. And, as you were describing, the complete dissolution of ego can be very challenging if we're getting shot at all the way past where we know we have a physical body. It can bring a lot of alarm to us if we're not prepared. And so during this experience, when I was in this place where I just kept connecting with everything, in every given moment, there was an opportunity to accept more of the full totality of all that is in its pleasure. I was brought to a very clear Gaia visual perspective where I was seeing these epically green forests of just lush overgrowth, vitality and abundance of water. And I saw my deceased father and my friends and my family and just everything that represented love and connection was present. And there was a big celebration and party. Everyone was invited. So I got to this place of oneness and all that isness and everythingness. And to have had that experience, Ryan, is so powerful to anchor into your DNA and into your emotional system and into your cognitive awareness, that I cannot ever undo that knowingness that is deep resonant within my physical body. And I am so grateful for that. And so, talking about the integration of these medicines, over the course of my lifetime, I've had various levels of maturity and levels of awareness of how powerful these tools are. I've had various levels of respect and complete experimentation, and some could even witness them as abuse in my younger years. I'm just so grateful that my integration is really listening to the wisdom that is coming from within when we are imbibing with these powerful sacred compounds or plant medicines. Also to listen to the teachings. So, I believe synthetic molecules can capture a lot of energy, frequency, intelligence, and intention, as most of them are crystalline in their very structure and patterning. Whereas lots of the natural medicines are, they contain their own innate intelligence. And so these innate intelligences not only bring these pharmacologically active constituents that create a kaleidoscope of information and unfolding within a human, but it carries its own intelligence and its own spirit. And there's also a symphony or a synergy of different plant compounds to really craft a more full graph of information. And so, my perspective through my experience is the synthetic compounds are oftentimes delivering more of a digital source of information where it's very pristine and very colorful and digital. And this is an overgeneralization, but there's a lot of shades of truth in what I'm sharing from my experience. Yeah. And they carry, single pharmacologically potent agonists that have a profound effect on the human body. What my experience has been is, generally speaking, the plants or the animal excretions, they contain their own intelligent life force. It's not this synthetically derived, chemically extracted, pharmacologically overly potent pharmacological pop. It is nature's divine symphony and code, where there's a lot of intelligence that the teacher of the mushrooms, the spirit, when you imbibe in an amount of the psilocybin mushrooms, you can feel the essence and the energy and the intelligence of the mushroom kingdom guiding you and maybe kicking your ass. And
yes.
And so it's this symphony both of the pharmacologically active constituents, But I believe that the intelligence that nature provides really delivers the medicine and the evolution. From my experience, lots of the synthetic compounds are empty space. And that empty space can be really beautiful and profound for healing. They could be fun, they could be creative, they could be difficult, they could be anything that we intend. And so with the crystalline structure of these synthetic isolated compounds, they're really, from my experience, you can really feel the intention and the energy, and you can really program the experience and have it deliver an even more targeted experience. Whereas the plant teachers, something like an iboga root versus the ibogaine, the iboga root is going to have more of this grandfather natural wildness plant love teacher that's going to shake a stick and beat you up, and in a loving parental father-like manner. And so the comparison of these synthetic molecules and these plant teachers, I think they all serve their purpose. And by setting our intention on what we're choosing to cultivate and receive, I really believe we get a lot more from these plant allies or from these divine compounds. And when utilized with a lot of reverence, intention, and if we incorporate more space for integration, I believe that we can integrate the lessons on a deeper cellular, emotional, and spiritual level. And we can listen to the guidance that these individual teachers have, helping to bring us into self-regulation in our relationships with them, and also guiding us on our divine path to serve all that is in this physical reality.
Wow, man. I agree with every single thing you said, and I've had that similar experience where I know that there's a consciousness, right, to cannabis. There's a consciousness to psilocybin. And when I've done synthetic compounds, it is just like that. It's almost like a choose your own adventure, right? It's your consciousness teaching you, right? And what is your consciousness? Well, it's what you call source, God, everything that is, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever name you want to put on it. I really love that comparison, right? That, integration really depends on, first of all, what was your intention? And then second of all, what type of, medicine are you interacting with, right? A natural one, a synthetic one, not that one's better than the other, right? But they're just different, right? So, really, I feel the intention leads the integration, because if you set your intention, you'll know how to integrate if you follow your soul, right? And you follow your heart. Because say if you set an intention for healing, you'll know to be able to, tune into your heart after you come out and just give yourself some space, right? And whatever you want to do with that space. Like the other day, I had a challenging night and I was getting the strong signal to go journal. And I don't really journal in terms of just writing page after page a lot, but I did. And I felt better at the end. And I know that you have a beautiful poem that you'd like to read too, man. And I'd love to give you some time to do that also, because if your poem is anything like your story, it's going to be an absolute work of art. And I am smitten to hear it, my friend.
Awesome. So some context about this poem. If we could all visualize a beautiful garden of eternal peace on the mountain of Cusco, Peru, where I was outside of Temple of the Moon at my friend Leslie's mountain house. And so I was overlooking this beautiful garden where the cactuses grow. And this poem I call The Garden of Eternal Peace. And it was written before having a Wachuma ceremony in this beautiful garden. The garden symphony begins with this moment. Splendor distilled down into the passion here. May the wild bees excite your body cells, knowing all nectar is birthed from this garden. The illusion of time entertains us for lifetimes. The flowers sit and laugh. Our wildest imaginations have brought us here to share. Secret patterns interwebbing the being of all creation. Step into the delicate unwinding of this breath. Electromagnetically, empathetically, feel this unlocking. Your DNA whispers the solutions to all problems. May this bird song enchant the nectar of the present, where sound expands through ripples of violet splendor. My ecstatic self bursts into rainbows beyond the infinite, and the cactus inspires outside of imagination. Sit down and surrender to the harmony inside, kaleidoscopic amplification of the stillness of this garden, where the flowers still sit and laugh under the clouds. Melt into the peace, knowing your absolute potential, allowing God to dissolve into the sea of harmonic vibrations. Forever is recrafted into the moments of this laughter. Dissolve the boundaries of space and time endlessly. Purify the chant of liquid garden harmonies. Take me away to where I appreciate the plants, and may my story be sung through all of my actions. And that is the garden of eternal peace.
Wow, my man. What a ride. That was absolutely incredible. And I'm excited to listen back to this and really go on a meditative journey with that. And I want to make sure I give you ample time to tell people where they can find you. Where can they find your products, and tell them where they can connect with you, because I know that after people listen to this episode, they're going to be extremely excited to find out more about you, man. You're such an interesting human being. And, I'm so grateful for your presence in my life and your gifts. And I'm just so excited to continue co-creating such beautiful magic with you, man. So tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah. So, I'm really grateful to share that all of the psychedelic entheogenic exploration has really empowered me to have a deep appreciation for the powers of nature. And so for the past decade, I've been exploring the potency of really taking these higher states of awareness and frequencies that I've integrated into my being through these psychedelic experiences and through different practices. And I've really integrated it into botanical medicine. And so my art has crafted over these past decade into a company called Essential Oil Wizardry. And so listeners can learn more about our arts, products, and crafts, and really more about me and my journey at essentialoilwizardry.com. You can sign up for our newsletter if you're inspired to learn more about how you can tune into these higher frequencies of awareness and consciousness using these plants, without necessarily needing to go through all these psychedelic experiences. One thing that these entheogens have taught me is that these are tools for eliciting a higher state of consciousness and awareness, and they work as a roadmap so that they're not necessary to tap into these higher states of frequencies and states of being, but rather they illuminate the pathway on how you can get to a higher state of self-actualization. These teachings have been so paramount in the development of our over 300 different products and formulations. And so I would love to share with the listeners an opportunity to connect with these higher states of being through my artesian experiments with the world of botanicals.
Wow, man. And yeah, for everyone listening, I'm going to go into this more in the outro, but Nick's oils have literally changed my life. I've used quite a few different essential oils and they all have their benefits, but there's something that's conscious about yours, right? Like when I put third eye on me, I enter that void within like 3 minutes. It's almost like alarming. I'm like, this has got to have like a warning label, right? Like jokingly, but like, it's like, it really works. And we were talking about before we started that the Euphoria drops, I literally don't want to use them because they smell so good that I never want that bottle to run out. Like they're unbelievable. And the Lionsgate, oh my goodness, what an incredible perfume. It's absolutely amazing. Rachel, my partner, she loves them. You met Rachel actually at Paul's house, and we've just been really enjoying them. And I'll throw on Harmony right before I go to bed, and it's like the last thing I smell before I'm out. And I don't wake up for 8 hours straight. And the first thing I smell when I wake up is the resonance of that Harmony. And it's so beautiful, man. And, I have one final question for you, as I usually do at the end of my podcast. I'm sure you've noticed a trend now. And that is this: if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Dr. Nick Berry would suggest to them to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Well, I think less is more. And I've learned that from a experience of going the very opposite direction. And so earlier in my explorations, I was more experimental, and these psychedelics can open up really etheric parts of ourselves that are very delicate. And by being able to dance and flirt with these subtle realms, we are able to have a deeper level of perception. And so I guess one reflection is that the power of psychedelics are very potent. And so being very intentional with your setting and your intention for your overall experience can really guide and empower a person before, during, and after to maximize the effectiveness of their experience. And when I say effectiveness, I mean to more fully integrate the potential benefits of utilizing these entheogenic medicines or these tools to support one's growth. And so the invitation to people that are feeling a heart resonance or an excitement of trying these different compounds, do your own research. Find a trusted source for whatever tool you're going to be working with, whatever teacher, plant medicine, sacred compound you're going to be working with. And to be really clear, that is not me. And to have a lot of openness to what the experience has to show you. Being open is very important because these psychedelics are so powerful and strong that by setting an intention and remaining open, the tool can guide you into the place where you really need to grow the most effectively. And by being adaptable with your intention and trusting the experience, you can minimize the discomfort, the pain, or the fear that can come up through these powerful tools because you're allowing the guidance to move through you.
I love that, man. Yeah, like for everyone listening, we live in a great time where now there are resources, right? Where you can, either visit a center that has professionals there that can help you through these things. Definitely use discernment if you're even thinking about doing something like this. And, as always, stay safe within this realm because, these medicines can offer so much and they can also, allow you to do just as much damage to yourself if done irresponsibly. And so, yeah, I love that piece of advice. And, guys, as I stated in the intro, Nick is a pure example of love in the human form. From the words he speaks to the products he creates, everything in his life is centered around discovering what is possible when love is put into action. His products are truly one of a kind, stemming from that ethos and the core values he holds within his life. And the main challenge I have in describing the magic he creates stems from the fact that words are simply not enough. One must have the direct experience to truly understand the magic that makes up his soul and infinite spirit. Dr. Nick is committed to raising the collective vibration of the earth by doing his part in allowing his clients to experience firsthand the healing powers of nature when infused with the human element of love. And for anyone interested in diving into this world, please do yourself, your soul, and your spirit a monumental favor by hopping onto Essential Oil Wizardry to begin that journey today. My best advice is to allow your soul to guide you to the oils that are currently resonating with you and prepare to go on the journey of a lifetime. Dr. Nick, thank you so much for being a constant reminder in my life of what is possible when love is taken from a mere noun to a potent verb, for being a warrior of the light, and for having a heart that inspires the world at large to gain awareness, gain acceptance, and receive the gift that is possible when we surrender to the flow of energy and information coming from our heart center and enter the potential residing within what I like to call vacation vibration. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho.